Chapter 1853. Under the lead of Nan Gongwu and Yu Linfeng, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen arrived at the residence that they had prepared for them. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen saw the residence, they couldn't help but be surprised. In front of them was a red palace. It was bright but not tacky. It was elegant and flamboyant. At first glance, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that she liked it very much. However, this bedroom was almost the same size as Di Beichen's bedroom. In the territory of Limitless Palace, there was actually no one living in this kind of bedroom. "Mistress, I wonder who is living in this bedroom. Will Beichen and I disturb her if we stay here?" Bailey Hongzhuang was a little worried. No matter who it was, if two strangers lived in their palace, it would be very inconvenient. Moreover, to be able to have such a big bedroom in Limitless Palace, her identity must not be simple. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Nan Gongwu couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha ha! Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Nan Gongwu in confusion. She didn't understand why Nan Gongwu suddenly laughed so happily. There wasn't anything wrong with her words. Nan Gongwu looked at Yu Linfeng and laughed. Now, she only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was extraordinarily cute. When Di Beichen saw Nan Gongwu laughing, his deep eyes gradually became clear. It was obvious that he understood a little. "Mistress, what are you laughing at?" Seeing Nan Gongwu laughing so happily, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but ask. "Haha, Hongzhuang, this is the bedroom we specially prepared for you." As soon as these words were spoken, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, and her clear eyes were filled with a wisp of surprise. "My bedroom?" Nan Gongwu nodded, "That's right. In the future, you will be the successor of Limitless Palace. Naturally, you will have your own palace. During this period of time, you will not be in Limitless Palace. Therefore, I will be in charge of decorating this bedroom. Take a look and see if you like it. If there's anything you don't like, we can change it when the time comes." When Yu Linfeng was preparing for an ordinary successor, the south apartment and Yu Linfeng had planned to build a palace for him. However, they didn't know whether the successor they were looking for was a man or a woman, so they couldn't make a move. After meeting Bailey Hongzhuang in person, Nan Gongwu arranged for people to start the construction in full swing. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with a touch of emotion. She never thought that her master and mistress would build a palace for her. Di Beichen's gaze also changed a little. It seemed that Palace Master Yu and Mistress Yu really liked Hongzhuang. Logically speaking, even if they had chosen the successor, they would pay more attention during the training process. If there was anything they were dissatisfied with, as long as the sect wasn't handed over to Hongzhuang, then everything would be fine. However, Palace Master Yu and Mistress Yu's actions had undoubtedly confirmed all of this. Thinking of this, Di Beichen felt happy for Bailey Hongzhuang. After all, to be able to make Palace Master Yu accept her so thoroughly, this was also Bailey Hongzhuang's incredible. "Thank you Master, Mistress." Bailey Hongzhuang bowed deeply. That light and melodious voice was now a little hoarse. Ever since she transmigrated to the present, her master and mistress were undoubtedly the elders who treated her extremely well. Chapter 1854. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance, Yu Linfeng and Nan Gongwu's expression changed a little. When they looked at Bailey Hongzhuang again, their eyes were filled with love. The more they looked at this disciple, the more satisfied they were. Although they had not started to teach Bailey Hongzhuang cultivation, they had already taken a good look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Nan Gongwu patted Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder, her bright and flamboyant face was full of smiles. "Come, let's go in and see if you like this arrangement." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled, her smile was sweet and moving. "I'll definitely like it if it's prepared by Master's wife." Hearing this, Nan Gongwu's smile widened a little. She immediately pulled Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and walked into the bedroom. Yu Linfeng and Di Beichen followed closely behind. He Mu brought the three beasts and walked at the back. Palace Master Yu is really good to Master. She actually prepared such a bedroom for Master. It's really a surprise. Xiao He could not help but sigh. Previously, they felt that Yu Linfeng and Nan Gongwu were very good people and treated Master very well. Now, it seemed that they treated Master extraordinarily well. In that case, will we have our own house in the future? Baisher's eyes lit up. They had always stayed in the same house with Master. This was because their master had always lived in only one room. When they were in the Tiangang sect, they either stayed with their master or stayed with He Mu. They had never had their own room. This bedroom was so big, they could have their own living quarters. That's a good idea. Xiao Bai was also very happy. Master now had such a big bedroom. Thinking about it, Palace Master and Palace Master's wife did this to let Master truly treat this place as her home. With her own living quarters, Master would naturally have a sense of belonging. This way, Master won't feel like an outsider in Limitless Palace in the future. Thinking of this, they had a good impression of the Palace Master and his wife. Bailey Hongzhuang was led by Nan Gongwu to visit every part of the palace. Bailey Hongzhuang also found that Nan Gongwu had arranged everything for her very carefully. She liked it very much. Hongzhuang, what do you think of this place? A smile bloomed on Nan Gongwu's face. She was full of confidence in her arrangements. Long ago, she had hoped that she could have a younger sister. That way, she could arrange everything for her younger sister. Although Bailey Hongzhuang was her junior and not her younger sister, Bailey Hongzhuang was the same to her. During this period of time, she had put a lot of effort into decorating this bedroom, and she felt extremely happy. The entire bedroom was mainly red. With one look, one could tell that this was a woman's bedroom. However, when Nan Gongwu first met Bailey Hongzhuang, she understood that Bailey Hongzhuang liked the simple and generous feeling. Therefore, when she was decorating the bedroom, she paid more attention. The bedroom in front of her was bright but not gaudy. It was graceful but not lacking in generosity. It was a combination of two styles. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang's current identity was the young palace master of Limitless Palace. Her bedroom couldn't be too simple. As long as it was the palace master or the young palace master, their bedroom would inevitably be more luxurious. Chapter 1855. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the bedchamber in front of her. She really couldn't find a single thing that she was dissatisfied with. She was really satisfied. No matter if it was the layout or the layout, she couldn't find fault with it. She just felt that it was really great. Mistress, your layout is really great. I really like it. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with a bright smile. Nan Gongwu seemed to have understood her taste to the extreme. She liked all the decorations. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the smile on Nan Gongwu's face became even brighter. It's good that you like it. Then I can rest assured. I like it so much. Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was filled with gratitude. On one hand, it was because master and mistress had prepared a bedchamber for her. On the other hand, it was because master's wife had arranged everything according to her preferences. Di Beichen couldn't help but praise after noticing the layout of the bedchamber. He and Hongzhuang had been together for so long. Naturally, he had a certain understanding of Hongzhuang's preferences. Obviously, the layout of the bedchamber was extremely compatible with Hongzhuang's preferences. She couldn't help but admire Nan Gongwu. Nan Gongwu had only met Hongzhuang once, but she knew Hongzhuang's habits so well. It was really amazing. Your master's wife has always been very good at decorating and understanding people's preferences. She spent a lot of effort to prepare and decorate this bedchamber. She's the happiest that you like it. Yu Linfeng's face was filled with a gentle and elegant smile. He was also very clear about Nan Gongwu's preferences. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Nan Gongwu in amazement. Mistress, you're really amazing. Being able to determine her preferences after only meeting her once, this was really not an ability that ordinary people could have. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's amazed and admiring look, Nan Gongwu waved her hand. This is my hobby. It's normal that I'm good at it. Basically, I've prepared everything that needs to be prepared. If you lack anything, just tell me. I'll help you prepare it, Nan Gongwu said with a smile. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at everything around her and said, Master's wife, you have already prepared everything for me. Why would I need anything else? All this time, the living conditions she lived in were ordinary. Back when she was in the general's residence, she lived in a dilapidated courtyard. When he arrived at the Azure Water School and lived in a special enrollment dormitory, the environment was undoubtedly a lot better, but the range was still not big enough. As for the competition, there was no need to talk about the living conditions. They had to make do with it. Under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang had long been used to all this and did not have too many requirements for the living conditions. The best living conditions belonged to the Tiangang sect. The Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's residence was a lot more spacious, and Di Beichen's palace was also very comfortable to live in. However, for the current her, she did not have the time or opportunity to enjoy it. She was wholeheartedly focused on improving her cultivation. Therefore, when she lived in Di Beichen's palace, they basically did not have much rest and had been cultivating in the desert world. Now that she saw this palace that belonged to her, her heart was filled with joy and happiness. Nan Gongwu smiled faintly. Then you should rest well here today. You'll have to start cultivating tomorrow. You should be mentally prepared. Chapter 1856. After Yu Linfeng and Nan Gongwu left, the three beasties ran to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Master, which room are we staying in? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the three excited beasties and couldn't help but smile. You can choose whichever room you want. The three beasties couldn't help but jump when they heard this. Master is the best. After receiving the order, Di Beichen gave He Mu a look and He Mu immediately brought the three beasties to find their room. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen went to the main bedroom that Nan Gongwu had specially prepared for them. Looking at everything that was arranged in the room, Bailey Hongzhuang's smile was warm and bright. Master and mistress are really good to me. They actually prepared all of this. Bailey Hongzhuang walked to the side and sat down. She supported her head with one hand and stared at Di Beichen. Master and mistress had always treated her so well and she felt that there was nothing she could do to repay them. I am only able to stay here because of my wife. Di Beichen's face was full of smiles and there was a hint of ridicule in his expression. However, his words were still filled with happiness for Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Di Beichen and said, in that case, I have to thank you for letting me stay in your bedroom in Tiangang sect. Di Beichen chuckled, same to you. They had rushed here at top speed and were a little tired. So, they immediately rested in the palace. From Nan Gongwu's words, Bailey Hongzhuang knew that tomorrow's cultivation would not be simple. She had to recharge her energy today so that she would have the energy to face master's training tomorrow. Bailey Hongzhuang was already mentally prepared. After all, she also suffered a lot when she was cultivating in her previous life. That night, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen did not cultivate nor did they go to the desert world. They just slept in the room. After not sleeping for a long time, they felt more energetic after a good sleep. The next day, Bailey Hongzhuang got up as soon as the sun rose. After quickly washing up, Bailey Hongzhuang prepared to report to the palace master's bedroom. Wife, work hard on your cultivation. I will wait for you in the bedroom. Di Beichen smiled and cheered Bailey Hongzhuang on. After knowing Hongzhuang's past, he knew that Hongzhuang must have seen a lot of the world. However, when he faced Hongzhuang, he could not help but worry about her. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded, okay, then I will go first. Just when Bailey Hongzhuang turned around and was about to leave, Di Beichen suddenly pulled Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and pulled her whole body back. Suddenly, a force came from her arm. Bailey Hongzhuang's body was pushed back and fell into Di Beichen's gorgeous arms. Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in his arms. He lowered his head and left a kiss on her forehead. Then, he said, "Go." A warm touch came from her forehead. Bailey Hongzhuang only felt that her heart had turned into a feather, floating in the air. "I am leaving." Bailey Hongzhuang followed the path she took yesterday and walked towards the palace master's bedroom. Fortunately, this area was obviously a place where the disciples of Limitless Palace would not set foot in. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang did not meet any disciples of Limitless Palace along the way. Chapter 1857. Master, disciple requests to see you. Outside the bedroom, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice sounded. As soon as her voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang saw Yu Linfeng and Nan Gongwu walking out of the room. Obviously, they had already noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's arrival. "Hongzhuang, you're here." Nan Gongwu's face bloomed with a warm smile as usual. To her, there was usually only her and Yu Linfeng here. She didn't even have anyone to talk to. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance was simply something she wished for. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and bowed, "Greetings, master and mistress." Yu Linfeng saw Bailey Hongzhuang's energetic appearance, and his eyes were filled with a touch of satisfaction. Cultivators should be full of energy when cultivating. On the contrary, those cultivators who suffered a little and complained were destined to not be able to walk on this path for long. The more outstanding the cultivator, the smaller the possibility of these problems existing. "Since you're ready, then follow me to the training field now." Yu Linfeng went straight to the point. He understood Bailey Hongzhuang's current situation very well. Time was undoubtedly the most precious. He knew that his disciple understood everything. Therefore, even if she suffered a little, Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely be able to bear it. "Yes." Bailey Hongzhuang quickly responded. Yu Linfeng took the lead and walked towards the training field. Nan Gongwu accompanied Bailey Hongzhuang at the back. "Hongzhuang, don't be fooled by your master's usual gentle appearance. Once he starts cultivating, he's extremely terrifying. This cultivation process will definitely be very tiring, but the rewards will also be great. I hope you can persevere." Nan Gongwu's expression revealed a bit of worry. The reason why Yu Linfeng was able to obtain achievements that others couldn't at such a young age was because his cultivation intensity was definitely not comparable to ordinary people. Behind everyone's envy, there were countless sorrows and hardships. She watched as Yu Linfeng improved himself in such a crazy cultivation. She resisted the heartache until now. However, such a serious Yu Linfeng also had a kind of charm that could enchant people. To become Yu Linfeng's disciple, there must be a certain price to pay. The amount of effort would be several times that of other cultivators. Bailey Hongzhuang was just a girl. She didn't know if Bailey Hongzhuang could bear all this. Feeling Nan Gongwu's worry, Nan Gongwu's face was filled with a faint smile. "Mistress, don't worry. No matter how hard it is, I will definitely persevere." Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes flickered with a deep and determined light. She was never afraid of how difficult the process would be. She was only afraid that her efforts would be of no use. Since it was a cultivation that was useful to her, no matter how difficult the process was, she would persevere with her own beliefs. Nan Gongwu saw Bailey Hongzhuang's bright eyes overflowing with color at a glance. The determination that flickered in them shocked her. Bailey Hongzhuang had suffered too much over the years. That was why she had such a determined look in her eyes. Only by enduring the most bitter of hardships can one rise above others. This sentence had always been extremely accurate. If one hadn't endured extreme pain, how could one have such determination? Chapter 1858. Compared to Nan Gongwu's worries, Yu Linfeng was very calm. Bailey Hongzhuang could even endure the pain of merging with the rainbow pearl. She would definitely be able to endure the hardships of cultivation. Back in the ruins, he had already seen Bailey Hongzhuang's firm determination. Thinking about it, when faced with such a background, there would only be two ways for a cultivator to react. First, she would completely break down and never be able to recover. Second, she would become stronger. She would be able to endure all the pain and setbacks. Because even such a blood feud could not defeat her, other things would naturally not be able to defeat her. Therefore, he was very confident in Bailey Hongzhuang. As they walked forward, Bailey Hongzhuang discovered that Yu Linfeng and Nan Gongwu were bringing her to a very secretive place. However, when they arrived at their destination, Bailey Hongzhuang discovered that there were other cultivators there. These cultivators were all wearing the disciple uniform of Limitless Palace. Bailey Hongzhuang recognized them at a glance. They were definitely disciples of Limitless Palace. When the disciples of Limitless Palace saw the sect master and Madam Sect Master personally coming here, their eyes were filled with surprise. Greetings to Sect Master and Madam Sect Master. Everyone bowed respectfully, but in their hearts, they were somewhat flattered. Usually, the Sect Master and Madam Sect Master rarely came here. Even for them, it was extremely difficult to meet the Sect Master and Madam Sect Master. However, when everyone's gaze landed on Bailey Hongzhuang, they could not help but be puzzled. Who is this lady? She can actually make the Sect Master and Madam Sect Master bring her here. It seems like her background is not weak. I have never seen this lady before. However, she is very beautiful. The Sect Master and Madam Sect Master specially brought her here. Could it be that they want her to cultivate? Everyone was discussing. They were filled with curiosity about Bailey Hongzhuang's identity. They had never seen such a young person with such great reputation. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw these cultivators, her eyes were also filled with surprise. She had never thought that there would be other cultivators here. This was undoubtedly beyond her expectations. These cultivators were obviously different from the cultivators she had seen outside. She wondered what these cultivators did. They are the core disciples of Limitless Palace. Their strength is much stronger than the other disciples. Their cultivation method is also different. You can train with them for the time being. Come find me when you're done with your training in Wind Canyon. Yu Linfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. At the moment, he didn't have a good understanding of Bailey Hongzhuang's strength. She had to pass the training first. Cultivation was also a gradual process. If one was too impatient, there would be no benefits. After listening to Yu Linfeng's words, Bailey Hongzhuang finally understood that these people were the core disciples of Limitless Palace. It was said that every sect's core disciple was an extremely important force. They were also cultivators that the sect focused on nurturing. However, to become a core disciple of a sect was not an easy task. This required one to be selected step by step from many disciples. After passing through layers of tests, they had to prove their talent, potential, and hard work before they could succeed. Chapter 1859. Yes. Bailey Hongzhuang replied. She understood that her master must have her own considerations. She would not have any objections. As long as it was a task assigned to her by her master, she would definitely complete it well. With the strength of Wuxia Palace, the strength of its core disciples would definitely not be weak. The process of cultivation would naturally not be simple. In comparison, her strength was probably not as good as these core disciples. Therefore, it would not be easy to complete this task. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang did not have any objections, Yu Linfeng nodded his head. All along, he had admired Bailey Hongzhuang's personality. No matter what she did, she would not ask too many questions. Many times, actions were more important than words. Previously, when he was thinking about how to improve Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, he had thought of many methods. However, improving cultivation was only one aspect. How to unleash one's combat power was also a matter of consideration. Therefore, it was necessary to improve one's qualities in other aspects. Only when a cultivator's speed, agility, and strength were improved, could they unleash their strongest strength. Otherwise, the cultivation would only become more and more unbalanced. Nangong Wu nodded her head slightly. Originally, she was a little worried that Yulin Feng would let Bailey Hongzhuang undergo some horrifying methods. In comparison, cultivating in Wind Canyon was undoubtedly gentler. If the core disciples of Wuji Palace knew what Nangong Wu was thinking at this moment, they would definitely be speechless. The cultivation in Wind Canyon was already very abnormal for them. After cultivating for a period of time, they were still unable to persist for a long time. However, in the eyes of the Madam Sect Master, this was actually a very gentle cultivation method. If this was gentle, then what kind of cultivation method was not gentle? Elder Qi. Yulin Feng waved his hand and a man of about 50 years old walked over from behind. After seeing the Sect Master and Madam Sect Master here, Qi Heshuan's face could not help but be filled with surprise. He quickly bowed and said, "Greetings to Sect Master and Madam Sect Master." Yulin Feng raised his right hand slightly, indicating for Su Heshuan to stand up. Only then did Su Heshuan stand up. The surprise and doubt in his eyes had yet to dissipate. Normally, the Sect Master and Madam Sect Master would never come here. What was going on today? Elder Su, Bailey Hongzhuang will be training with you in Wind Canyon these days. Can you give her some pointers? Yulin Feng said slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang was his disciple, but he did not want to give her special treatment in this kind of ordinary cultivation. Only with a strong enough foundation would there be unlimited possibilities in the future. From Yulin Feng's point of view, this was not giving Bailey Hongzhuang any preferential treatment. But in the eyes of the disciples, this was simply taking care of her. The sect master had personally brought Bailey Hongzhuang here and instructed the elders to teach her well. This made them even more curious about what kind of person this Bailey Hongzhuang was. Su Heshuan quickly nodded and replied respectfully, "Don't worry, sect master. I will definitely teach Miss Bailey well." Seeing this, Yulin Feng's eyes flashed with satisfaction. Now, the first stage was handed over to Su Heshuan. He only needed to pay attention to Bailey Hongzhuang's performance and results. Then, everyone, cultivate well. After leaving this sentence, Yulin Feng left with Nangong Wu. Chapter 1860. Greetings to Elder Su. Bailey Hongzhuang bowed to Elder Su. Her expression was humble and respectful. Currently, she did not know how to train in Wind Canyon. She could only listen to Elder Su's introduction. Su Heshuan had many guesses about Bailey Hongzhuang's identity. He did not know what background Bailey Hongzhuang had. However, after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's humble and courteous appearance, he had a better impression of her. Any cultivator with a slightly higher status would usually think highly of themselves. This kind of person was the most troublesome. Obviously, Bailey Hongzhuang was not such a troublesome existence. Let me introduce you to Wind Canyon. Su Heshuan took the lead and walked towards the direction of Wind Canyon. Bailey Hongzhuang followed closely behind. This is Wind Canyon. There are strong winds all year round. Moreover, these winds are different from ordinary winds. When these winds blow onto a cultivator's body, the yuan power in the cultivator's body will constantly decrease. However, after cultivating here for a long time, the cultivator's recovery speed of yuan power will be much faster than ordinary cultivators. Moreover, there are strong gales here. It is very effective for cultivators to cultivate their movement skills here. Not only that, when the yuan power in the body is exhausted, the speed of cultivation will be much faster. Listening to Su Heshuan's introduction, Bailey Hongzhuang had a certain understanding of Wind Canyon. This was the first time she had heard of such a magical place. She did not know what kind of wind would have such a special effect. Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to see for herself. Under Su Heshuan's lead, Bailey Hongzhuang finally arrived at Wind Canyon. She saw the true appearance of Wind Canyon. This was a huge canyon. The mountains on both sides were extremely close. There was only a passage in the middle that allowed a few people to pass through. Moreover, there were gales blowing out from the inside. It was very magical. Bailey Hongzhuang took a look and saw that there were several figures in Wind Canyon. Obviously, they were the core disciples of Limitless Palace. They were cultivating in Wind Canyon. This is the Wind Canyon, Su Heshuan said slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Her eyes were fixed on the Wind Canyon. Because the passage was very narrow and sunlight could not reach the Wind Canyon, the entire Wind Canyon was very dark. The closer we get to the Wind Canyon, the stronger the hurricane becomes, and the shorter the duration it lasts. When you reach the place marked by the red line and stay there for a full 4 hours, it will prove that you have passed the test of the Wind Canyon. Hearing Su Heshuan's words, Bailey Hongzhuang looked down into the depths of Wind Canyon. Sure enough, there was a red line there, and many core disciples were in front of that red line. Obviously, they could not successfully stay at the red line. You can cultivate here first. If there's anything you don't understand, you can come and ask me, Su Heshuan said slowly. Thank you, Elder Su, Bailey Hongzhuang bowed again. Su Heshuan nodded slightly. He was quite satisfied with Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude. However, before he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's performance, he would not show any attitude. After Su Heshuan left, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Wind Canyon. She was very curious. What kind of hurricane was it? She also wanted to experience it. Chapter 1861. She never thought that this Wind Canyon would also have the effect of training her elemental energy. She wanted to know what kind of improvement she would get if she trained here. The surrounding core disciples kept sizing up Bailey Hongzhuang. Their hearts were vaguely filled with envy and jealousy. I wonder who this girl is. Even Elder Su treats her exceptionally well. A girl lamented. As everyone knew, Elder Su had always been a very serious person. He rarely gave people a good face. In comparison, Elder Su's attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang was much better than his attitude towards them. Who asked us to not have a background like her? Another girl spoke out. Right now, we don't know anything. Let's see how she performs in the Wind Canyon. If she doesn't have strength, even if her status is extraordinary, it still won't be of any use. Everyone nodded their heads. As core disciples of Limitless Palace, they had all gone through countless hardships to obtain their current status and treatment. Now that a groundless girl had suddenly appeared and was able to enjoy the same treatment as them as core disciples, their hearts would naturally be filled with dissatisfaction. Bailey Hongzhuang only felt that many gazes were focused on her. Although she didn't know what those cultivators were talking about, she could roughly guess what they were talking about. If it was anyone else, after seeing their hard work, the fruits of their hard work being so easily obtained by someone else, they would definitely feel unbalanced in their heart. However, these weren't within the scope of her concern. Because as long as she displayed her strength, all the doubtful remarks would dissipate. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang directly walked into the Wind Canyon. When Bailey Hongzhuang approached the Wind Canyon, she felt some hurricanes blowing towards her body. However, her position was a certain distance away from the Wind Canyon. So when these hurricanes blew on her body, it didn't affect her too much. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly walked towards the Wind Canyon. The closer she got to the Wind Canyon, the stronger the hurricanes became. After carefully sensing for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang discovered that the elemental energy in her body was indeed constantly decreasing. This hurricane can really dissipate the elemental energy in a person's body. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with amazement. It was her first time seeing such a mysterious hurricane. There's actually such a mysterious canyon in the Limitless Palace. It's truly amazing. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed in her heart. No wonder Limitless Palace was able to become one of the 10 great sects in such a short period of time. Sure enough, they had a special background and methods. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly walked into the canyon, allowing the hurricane to blow on her body. The elemental energy of level 2 Green Realm was constantly decreasing. Moreover, this hurricane was very strong. Even if a cultivator wanted to move forward with this hurricane, it would take a lot of effort. Not only that, after Bailey Hongzhuang carefully probed, she discovered that elemental energy was completely unusable in this wind ravine. As long as he used his elemental energy, the elemental energy in his body would be consumed at a much faster rate. Furthermore, the elemental energy would not be of any use. Therefore, they could only rely on their own physical strength to resist the hurricane. Chapter 1862. Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang heard Su Heshuan say that she only needed to stay at the red line for 4 hours to complete the assessment. She felt that this was not an extremely difficult task. However, as Bailey Hongzhuang walked into the wind canyon, she felt that the hurricane was getting stronger and stronger and the yuanli in her body was rapidly dissipating. She then understood what Su Heshuan said. It was definitely not an easy task to stand at the red line for 4 hours. Bailey Hongzhuang walked forward. Although she had now broken through to Green Realm Level 2, she felt that the yuanli in her body had dissipated by more than half after she walked for less than 50 meters. This hurricane's consumption of yuanli is really terrifying. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed faintly. The speed at which she was consuming her spiritual power was too astonishing. It was extremely difficult to stay here for 2 hours. Bailey Hongzhuang knew that to pass the Wind Canyon's assessment, it was obviously not something that could be completed in a day or two. She was afraid that it was a long-term mission that required her continuous training to have a chance of success. She carefully observed for a moment. The surrounding core disciples had obviously stayed here for a long time. However, there was not much difference between where the core disciples stayed and where she was standing now. She roughly sized them up. Through the time these cultivators stayed and the expression they revealed, she could roughly determine that the strength of these core disciples had mostly reached Green Realm Level 5. Compared to them, her strength was undoubtedly weaker and did not have any advantage. However, for such a gap in strength, Bailey Hongzhuang did not feel any disappointment in her heart. After all, these cultivators had stayed in Limitless Palace for a long time before they could become core disciples. She was just a new disciple who had just participated in the assessment competition. Compared to them, the difference in strength was only a few levels. It was already considered good. Bailey Hongzhuang could judge the strength of others through their performance. The other disciples could naturally see her strength through Bailey Hongzhuang's performance. This girl's strength should be around Green Realm Level 2. I didn't expect that Palace Master and Palace Master's wife would specially send her here. It seems that her background is really powerful. You can't say that. This girl's age is only around 17 years old. To be able to have such strength already proves that her talent is extremely shocking. Among the core disciples present, there were many cultivators who were realistic. Just by looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's age, to be able to have such strength, she was indeed the leader of the younger generation. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, their cultivation was a bit stronger, but at the same time, their age was also much older than Bailey Hongzhuang. In this way, when Bailey Hongzhuang's age was the same age as them, her cultivation would be much stronger than them. Following this cultivator's words, the surrounding core disciples' expression to be changed a bit. Just as this cultivator said, with Bailey Hongzhuang's age to have such strength, her talent was indeed very outstanding. Suddenly, the cultivators who were dissatisfied with Bailey Hongzhuang did not know what to say at this moment. Chapter 1863. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed that quite a number of core disciples had left the Wind Canyon to meditate and recover their yuan qi after training for a period of time. However, very few cultivators were able to stay at the Red Line for more than 4 hours. Speaking of which, the location of the Red Line was indeed miraculous. The area where the Red Line was located was undoubtedly much wider and could accommodate quite a number of cultivators. She noticed that almost all the core disciples had stopped near the Red Line. It seemed that the task that Elder Su had assigned to all of them was the same. As long as they stayed at the Red Line for 4 hours, they would be considered to have passed the Wind Canyon's test. Bailey Hongzhuang also walked towards the Red Line. When faced with the hurricane, Bailey Hongzhuang tried her best to control the yuan qi in her body so that it would not dissipate as quickly as possible. The hurricane grew stronger and stronger and Bailey Hongzhuang needed to expend more energy with every step she took. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had always paid attention to raising her body's quality and strength when she had been training in the past. Hence, when faced with the hurricane, Bailey Hongzhuang's movements were not affected at all. The only thing that was affected was the yuan qi in her body that was dissipating continuously. Bailey Hongzhuang only felt that this was indeed a good place for training. If Di Beichen knew of the existence of the Wind Canyon, he would definitely think that the Wind Canyon was extremely miraculous. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang walked forward and gradually approached the Red Line, the surrounding cultivators all revealed looks of astonishment when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's actions. Oh my God, who is this woman? The power of this hurricane is extremely shocking. If it wasn't for multiple attempts, very few people would be able to walk this far on their first try. That's right, she had completely relied on her body's strength to walk this far. I couldn't tell that this lady was so delicate and pretty. I didn't expect her strength to be so shocking. The person that the palace master and palace mistress have brought is indeed extraordinary. If we hadn't been training in the Wind Canyon for a long enough time, we wouldn't have been able to successfully walk to the Red Line. In that moment, the crowd's gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang changed. At the very least, it was rare to see a cultivator with such powerful physical strength. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't know what everyone was thinking. She only realized that when she reached the Red Line, the elemental energy in her body was depleted at an alarming rate. Not to mention 4 hours, she wouldn't even be able to last for an incense stick's worth of time. Because the consumption of the origin energy in one's body by this hurricane was truly too shocking. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but feel curious. She didn't know how to cultivate to be able to stay at the Red Line for 4 hours. Sure enough, as Bailey Hongzhuang expected, after staying at the position of the Red Line for 30 minutes, she found that the essence energy in her body was exhausted. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang did not stay in the Wind Canyon for too long. Since the elemental energy in her body had been depleted, what she should do now was to recover the elemental energy in her body as quickly as possible so that she could continue cultivating. When Bailey Hongzhuang slowly walked out of the Wind Canyon, she found that the elemental energy in her body had been completely drained and there wasn't even the slightest bit left. Bailey Hongzhuang immediately took out a few energy recovery pills and consumed them. To her now, the most important thing was to increase her abilities and not cultivation resources. Chapter 1864. Initially, when they were heading towards the assessment competition, Bailey Hongzhuang had prepared quite a number of energy recovery pills. Although she had used up quite a number of them during the assessment competition, the number of Qiankuan bags that they had obtained was also quite a number. Hence, she still had quite a number of energy recovery pills. Under such circumstances, using the energy recovery pills was undoubtedly the most suitable method. As long as she could quickly recover her elemental energy, she would have more time to cultivate in the Wind Canyon. Cultivating. Beside Bailey Hongzhuang, there were also quite a number of core disciples who were meditating to recover their elemental energy. From their point of view, Bailey Hongzhuang was only cultivating in the Wind Canyon for the first time, and she was already able to reach the red line position. Furthermore, she was able to reach the time it took for a joss stick to burn. This was already an extremely shocking result. In comparison, although they were able to stay at the red line position for a longer time than Bailey Hongzhuang, but when they first came to the Wind Canyon to cultivate, their results could never be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang. It was just that they were not willing to admit this point. However, when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang eating the energy recovery pills as if they were jelly beans, the shock in their hearts became even more intense. As the core disciples of Limitless Palace, the cultivation resources that they possessed were undoubtedly much more than the ordinary disciples. The energy recovery pills were also pills that they possessed. However, none of them would waste the energy recovery pills like Bailey Hongzhuang. Every time they recovered their elemental energy, they would head to the Wind Canyon to cultivate in a short period of time before they needed to recover again. If they were to use the energy recovery pills like Bailey Hongzhuang, then the amount of energy recovery pills required in a day would definitely be an extremely shocking amount. This lady is really extravagant. She actually used the energy recovery pills to recover her elemental energy. I wonder how long she can last. A lady slowly spoke out. Her voice was filled with ridicule and jealousy. Everyone looked at each other in dismay but did not say anything. After all, in this world, there were many people who were born with better conditions than them. Bailey Hongzhuang also heard the woman's words, and her eyes couldn't help but sweep over the woman. After Chu Yingfei noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze on her, she was also stunned for a moment, but she quickly raised her eyebrows and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang proudly, unwilling to let her aura weaken even a little. In her opinion, she had gone through a lot of hardships to obtain this position. This woman was so beautiful that it was obvious that she did not rely on her own abilities to obtain this position. What's wrong? Could it be that I'm not telling the truth? Chu Yingfei asked. Looking at Chu Yingfei's dissatisfied face, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't say much. Explaining at this time was useless. When a person is prejudiced against you from the beginning, no matter how you explain, she will only see it as a cover-up. When you use your strength to prove everything, then all the rumors and slanders will disappear into nothingness. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang closed her eyes and continued to cultivate. When Chu Yingfei saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was minding her own business and ignoring her, her expression became ugly. The surrounding core disciples looked at Chu Yingfei with a somewhat funny expression. Bailey Hongzhuang, this kind of person, shouldn't even bother with Chu Yingfei. Feeling the gazes of the surrounding disciples, Chu Yingfei's expression became even uglier. Chapter 1865. Thinking of this, Chu Yingfei felt even more depressed. Her gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang was also filled with displeasure. With the help of the energy recovery pill, the yuan power in Bailey Hongzhuang's body recovered very quickly. In a short period of time, it had already recovered to its original state. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was not in a hurry to enter the Wind Canyon again. Instead, she was thinking about how to make her yuan power last longer in the Wind Canyon. Obviously, wanting to possess enough origin energy to persist for 4 hours under such circumstances was simply impossible. She did not know how long it would take for her to have that kind of strength. Therefore, since her master and elder Su allowed her to cultivate here, then there must be other methods that could allow her to last so long here. Therefore, rashly entering the Wind Canyon again did not have much use. Previously, she entered the Wind Canyon only to understand the characteristics of the Wind Canyon and how long she could last. Now that she had a certain understanding in her heart, she needed to figure out what she should improve here and what method she needed to use to continue persevering. After all, she was now different from the other core disciples. The others had a lot of time to improve their cultivation, but now she had to seize every second. Therefore, she had to pass the Wind Canyon's test as quickly as possible and then accept her master's other tests. Since there was only so much yuan power in her body and she wanted to last so long in the Wind Canyon, then she could only control the yuan power in her body and slow down the speed of its dissipation. That was the only way he could hold on for a longer time. After thinking carefully, Bailey Hongzhuang already understood the root of the problem. However, it was definitely not a simple thing to do to reach this step. Obviously, this required the cultivator to improve the method of controlling the yuan power in their body and use it more accurately. This kind of feeling was similar to when using a martial technique. The principle needed might only be 10%, but many cultivators who did not know how to control themselves would need to spend 20% or even more when using it. In this way, when fighting, they would suffer quite a bit. Bailey Hongzhuang also had a certain understanding of this in her previous life. Moreover, the old man in her family had also specially taught her. However, it wasn't easy to precisely control the elemental energy, and there weren't any suitable conditions to practice it. Only when cultivators used martial techniques, they would try their best to learn how to control it. She never thought that Limitless Palace actually had this kind of training method. It was really rare. After following Bailey Hongzhuang to the sect, she realized that the current sect had many advantages compared to 2 years ago. After understanding this point, Bailey Hongzhuang did not hesitate anymore. Wanting to control the yuan power in one's body was not something that could be done just thinking about it. It was only through continuous trials and practice could one achieve this goal. Bailey Hongzhuang had already prepared. Through the process of time trials and time, she gradually grasped this method. Once again entering the Wind Canyon, Bailey Hongzhuang was not in a hurry to rush to the location of the red line. Instead, she controlled the power in her body a little bit, trying to minimize the consumption of power. Chapter 1866. Bailey Hongzhuang was an alchemist and an inscription master. Her mental strength was originally much stronger than that of ordinary cultivators. Therefore, at this moment, when her mental strength completely spread out, she could feel every subtle change in the yuanli in her body. Every time this hurricane blew on her body, it would take away the yuanli in her body through her pores. When Bailey Hongzhuang discovered this, she thought of ways to seal her pores to reduce the dissipation of the yuanli. However, even though Bailey Hongzhuang thought of ways to seal her pores, the yuanli was still in the process of dissipating. However, Bailey Hongzhuang discovered that in this way, the speed of dissipation of the yuanli was indeed much slower than before. Bailey Hongzhuang's method of sealing her pores was to spread her yuanli all over the surface of her body to prevent the hurricane from taking away the yuanli in her body. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly moved forward, feeling every change in detail and thinking of ways to prevent the dissipation of the yuanli in her body. In the process of sensing, her understanding of the yuanli was constantly improving. Just like this, Bailey Hongzhuang continuously improved her control and understanding of the yuanli. However, in the eyes of the other core disciples, Bailey Hongzhuang's behavior was really strange. Previously, when Bailey Hongzhuang tried for the first time, she had already successfully walked to the position of the red line. However, in this second attempt, Bailey Hongzhuang moved forward at an extremely slow speed. This action made the crowd somewhat suspicious. They did not understand what exactly Bailey Hongzhuang was doing. They had already cultivated in Wind Canyon for a very long time, but they were still unable to withstand the consumption of the yuanli in this hurricane. Therefore, they could only continuously consume their yuanli and meditate to recover. In this process, they raised their own cultivation. What exactly is this girl doing? Why can't I understand what she is doing? A male cultivator had a puzzled expression. He had been observing Bailey Hongzhuang for a while, but from beginning to end, he did not understand what Bailey Hongzhuang was doing. However, according to his judgment, Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely doing something because Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with a trace of pondering. I don't know. The cultivator beside him shook his head. He also did not understand what Bailey Hongzhuang was doing. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang arrived at Wind Canyon, she had not said anything. She only minded her own business and experienced everything here. However, this did not change everyone's curiosity towards her. What else could she be doing? She is just deliberately mystifying things. Chu Yingfei's face was filled with dissatisfaction and disdain. From her point of view, Bailey Hongzhuang's actions was deliberately mystifying things. She wanted to use this method to show that she was different from others and attract everyone's attention. Before, Bailey Hongzhuang had ignored her, which made her very unhappy. Therefore, at this moment, when Chu Yingfei said these words, she deliberately raised her voice so that Bailey Hongzhuang could hear her. Since Bailey Hongzhuang made her lose face in front of everyone, then she would not let Bailey Hongzhuang be happy. Moreover, according to her judgment, if Bailey Hongzhuang was really an extraordinary person, then the palace master and the palace master's wife would definitely introduce her. However, the palace master only asked Elder Su to teach Bailey Hongzhuang cultivation. Her treatment was not much different from theirs. Chapter 1867. After thinking about this, Chu Yingfei increasingly felt that her judgment was correct. Therefore, her gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang was filled with even more unhappiness. Any cultivator would not have a good impression of someone who got in through the back door. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude was so arrogant. Bailey Hongzhuang did not understand. She did not even say a word to Chu Yingfei, but Chu Yingfei actually had so many opinions towards her. However, she did not care. No matter what opinions Chu Yingfei had, she would just let her be. Any cultivator who did not work hard enough in cultivation would always look for other reasons when they saw other outstanding cultivators. After some cultivators heard Chu Yingfei's sarcastic words, their expressions changed a little. In fact, although they were full of curiosity about Bailey Hongzhuang's identity and suspected that Bailey Hongzhuang got in through the back door, after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's true strength, their original thoughts had dissipated a lot. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang herself had such strength. Now, Chu Yingfei was targeting Bailey Hongzhuang everywhere. It was undoubtedly very impolite. Chu Yingfei, watch your words. At this moment, a man stood out and looked at Chu Yingfei and said. Seeing that someone actually stood up for Bailey Hongzhuang, Chu Yingfei's expression suddenly became ugly. Bailey Hongzhuang was just an outsider. Chu Yingfei thought that she said such words to stand up for everyone. However, now, someone actually spoke about her for Bailey Hongzhuang. This was really intolerable. Pei Yifan, what do you mean by this? Chu Yingfei's face was full of dissatisfaction. She looked at Pei Yifan indignantly. She did not understand why Pei Yifan would stand on Bailey Hongzhuang's side at this time. I don't mean anything. I just hope that you can watch your words when you speak. Since we are all in Wuji Palace, then we should get along well and not speak ill of each other. Pei Yifan's words were very fair. He did not know what kind of person Bailey Hongzhuang was, but Bailey Hongzhuang's current performance was enough to prove her ability. In this world, the treatment of geniuses was often different from ordinary people. However, when Pei Yifan's words fell into Chu Yingfei's ears, it became dissatisfaction and reprimand towards her. Chu Yingfei's face instantly turned red. She looked at Pei Yifan with eyes full of anger. Chu Yingfei's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's face, she could not help but have a mocking smile on her face. Pei Yifan, Chu Yingfei's eyes, Yingfei's words. Chu Yingfei's eyes were filled with mockery as she looked at Pei Yifan with disdain. Even if you stand up for her, why don't you take a look at yourself? She doesn't even like you. Don't think too highly of yourself. You will only make a joke out of yourself. Chu Yingfei's words were sharp and unpleasant. She was not polite at all. After hearing Chu Yingfei's words, the surrounding disciples could not help but frown. Chapter 1868. Just like now, standing up for Bailey Hongzhuang was something that Pei Yifan often did. But now, after Chu Yingfei said these words, it was a completely different feeling. This was completely slandering Pei Yifan. Some of Pei Yifan's friends who had a good relationship with him couldn't help but have ugly expressions after hearing Chu Yingfei's slander of Pei Yifan. Chu Yingfei, what nonsense are you talking about? Pei Yifan straightened his face. He didn't have any improper thoughts about Bailey Hongzhuang. However, Chu Yingfei's words were like a groundless accusation. How am I talking nonsense? If you didn't have such thoughts, why would you stand up for a cultivator who came through the back door? Chu Yingfei didn't believe what Pei Yifan said at all. In her opinion, other than this reason, Pei Yifan had no other reason to stand up for Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang originally didn't plan to pay attention to Chu Yingfei. A woman like her who wanted to see the world in chaos was extremely jealous. No matter how she argued, Chu Yingfei would definitely pester her endlessly. It was just a waste of her time. She didn't expect that another cultivator would stand up for her at this time. It was really beyond her expectations. After seeing Pei Yifan's clear black eyes, she understood that Pei Yifan didn't have any other thoughts about her. It was just that he was very upright. It was just that Chu Yingfei was looking for trouble with her, but now she was even slandering Pei Yifan. This was something that Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't tolerate. Through the back door. When Chu Yingfei said the words through the back door, the expressions of the cultivators present changed a little. They also had the same guess about Bailey Hongzhuang in their hearts, but none of them would say it out loud. They didn't expect Chu Yingfei to say these words so directly. Wasn't she trying to expand the conflict between her and Bailey Hongzhuang to the maximum? Everyone's gaze couldn't help but shift to Bailey Hongzhuang. They wanted to know how Bailey Hongzhuang would react after hearing Chu Yingfei say such words. Chu Yingfei also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang proudly. Just this point alone was something Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't explain at all. Looking at Chu Yingfei's proud look, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curled into a mocking smile. Her red lips slightly opened, so what if I came through the back door? Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the expressions of the cultivators present changed. In their opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang would find a way to explain herself. No one thought Chu Yingfei. Yingfei Hongzhuang's words. Chu Yingfei was. Chu Yingfei was also dumbfounded at this moment. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's overbearing appearance, she only felt that it was inconceivable. Obviously, going through the back door was something that couldn't be brought up in public, but Bailey Hongzhuang could still say it so matter-of-factly. Over the years, Bailey Hongzhuang had encountered many opponents. Among them, there were also many people who were sharp-tongued. Therefore, she knew how to deal with these cultivators who were intoxicated by their success and make them speechless. Chapter 1869. Bailey Hongzhuang's indifferent and disdainful gaze swept across Chu Yingfei's face. Her voice was light and cold. If you have the ability, then go through the back door. If you don't have the ability, then stop talking nonsense. Bailey Hongzhuang's words were concise and comprehensive, but they were filled with incomparable arrogance. In reality, she did indeed go through the back door to come here and cultivate with the core disciples. However, she also paid an endless price to obtain the qualifications she had today. Comparatively speaking, the test she passed was much better than the other core disciples. Therefore, standing here cultivating, she only felt that she had a clear conscience. Chu Yingfei's face flushed red. She angrily looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. She opened her mouth, but couldn't say a single word to refute. Because, everything Bailey Hongzhuang said was simply irrefutable. Indeed, in her heart, she was jealous that Bailey Hongzhuang could enjoy such treatment. However, she was very clear that with her background, it was impossible for her to accomplish all of this. The atmosphere became strange in an instant. Everyone's gaze constantly looked back and forth between Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Yingfei. However, it was clear that in this contest, Bailey Hongzhuang had the absolute upper hand. At that time, it was the first time I saw someone go through the back door so naturally. I really didn't expect that your skin would be so thick. Chu Yingfei angrily shouted and cursed Bailey Hongzhuang. Although I don't know what the ranking of the core disciples is, just by looking at your meddling and jealous appearance, I can determine that your strength is definitely at the bottom of the core disciples. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Chu Yingfei with ridicule. Her words were even more merciless. It was impolite not to reciprocate. Since Chu Yingfei liked to stir up trouble, then she naturally wouldn't let Chu Yingfei have it easy. When Bailey Hongzhuang said these words, everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a bit of surprise. This was because Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment was not wrong at all. Chu Yingfei's strength was indeed the weakest among them. Just by looking at the gazes of the surrounding cultivators, Bailey Hongzhuang was certain that her judgment was not wrong. She could not help but curl her lips into a mocking smile. Instead of using your mind to meddle in other people's business, why don't you put your mind on cultivation? Otherwise, you will only be jealous of others forever. In this world, there had always been many cultivators who blamed the heavens and blamed others. They were jealous of the talent and strength of others, but they never thought of working hard themselves. Instead, they put all their thoughts on slandering and envying others. Clearly, Chu Yingfei was such a cultivator. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words that hit the nail on the head, Chu Yingfei's face couldn't hold it any longer. She only felt that the way everyone looked at her changed a bit, as if she had become a joke in an instant. Don't go too far. Chu Yingfei's face was ferocious. She looked as if she wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang immediately. Here, the person with the weakest strength is you. Seeing Chu Yingfei's angry appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang was still indifferent. Her calm eyes didn't have the slightest fluctuation. Clearly, Chu Yingfei's threat had no effect on her. What? You're the one who's been causing trouble for me, but now you're not letting me say anything. Who do you think you are? Chapter 1870. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Chu Yingfei provocatively. Ever since she came, Chu Yingfei had been looking for trouble with her. Now, even Pei Yifan was involved. If she didn't express her stance, Chu Yingfei would only become more and more intense. In terms of eloquence, she didn't lose to anyone. Bailey Hongzhuang's words made Chu Yingfei speechless. She didn't expect that Bailey Hongzhuang, who had been holding back before, would open her mouth so sharply. She didn't even give her a chance to refute. Feeling everyone's constantly changing gazes, Chu Yingfei couldn't help but feel anxious. She originally wanted to teach Bailey Hongzhuang a lesson in front of everyone, but she didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be so powerful. If she didn't think of a way to turn the tables, today's matter would really become a joke in everyone's eyes. In the future, she wouldn't be able to raise her head when facing Bailey Hongzhuang. This was definitely something she didn't want to see. You're a new disciple of Limitless Palace. Now, in front of everyone, you actually dare to insult your senior sister. Don't you know how to be polite? When Chu Yingfei said these words, not to mention Bailey Hongzhuang, the surrounding cultivators looked at her as if they were looking at a joke. Previously, it was clearly Chu Yingfei who was targeting Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang just refuted a few words, and Chu Yingfei put on the airs of a senior sister. This was a bit too shameless. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled and looked at Chu Yingfei mockingly. I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen someone as shameless as you. Bailey Hongzhuang thought that she had seen a lot of scum, but it was rare to see someone as shameless as Chu Yingfei. After Bailey Hongzhuang said this, everyone's eyes changed a bit, but in their hearts, they felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's words were very reasonable. Wasn't Chu Yingfei's current actions shameless? The way Pei Yifan looked at Bailey Hongzhuang gradually changed. Previously, when he heard Chu Yingfei mocking Bailey Hongzhuang remained unmoved and never defended herself. He only felt that Chu Yingfei's bullying of Bailey Hongzhuang was too much, so he stood out to say a few words. However, now it seemed that Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely not afraid of Chu Yingfei. She just disdained to talk to Chu Yingfei. Now that Hongzhuang had suddenly stood out, there was only one reason for him to do so, because of him. Other than that, there was no other reason. Facing Bailey Hongzhuang like this, Pei Yifan's mood was very complicated. Now it seemed that the cultivators brought by the palace master and madam were indeed extraordinary. At least, Bailey Hongzhuang's temperament was not comparable to ordinary people. Chu Yingfei's expression was extremely ugly. Bailey Hongzhuang actually dared to call her shameless in public. You dare to call me shameless? Chu Yunfei's voice was sharp, and his face was ferocious and ugly. That angry look was as if he couldn't wait to rush up and tear Bailey Hongzhuang apart in the next moment. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was still calm, and was not moved by Chu Yingfei's anger at all. You did such a thing yourself, are you still afraid of me talking about it? Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes slightly raised, and her beautiful face was filled with disdain. Chapter 1871. I'll give you two choices. Either you apologize to Pei Yifan now, or you bear the consequences. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was ice-cold, filled with warning and threat. A tyrannical and irresistible aura erupted from Bailey Hongzhuang's body. The aura of a superior imperceptibly gave the crowd an indescribable sense of oppression. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, the cultivators present were all stunned for a moment. They never thought that this newcomer would have such an extraordinary aura at such a young age. If it was said that everyone still had doubts about Bailey Hongzhuang's identity before, they now understood after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's aura. Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely not an ordinary person. Aura was an extremely mysterious thing. It could only be cultivated by being in a high position for a long time. Since Bailey Hongzhuang could have such an aura, it could be seen what kind of environment she grew up in. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's aura, Chu Yingfei's expression suddenly changed. She never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would be so shocking once she was angry. However, if she were to apologize to Bailey Hongzhuang now, wouldn't it be the same as lowering her head to Bailey Hongzhuang? She absolutely could not tolerate this. Chu Yingfei's expression changed again and again. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's overbearing appearance, she felt that she absolutely could not admit defeat like this. Otherwise, she would never be able to raise her head in front of Bailey Hongzhuang in the future. Moreover, this was Wuji Palace, and Elder Su was not far away. If Bailey Hongzhuang really dared to do anything to her, Elder Su would not let it go. Bailey Hongzhuang had only just arrived at Wind Canyon, and she had already started to stir up trouble. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang would also be punished. If I don't apologize, what can you do to me? Chu Yingfei asked in return. Her expression was full of ridicule, and her attitude was even more unbridled. Can you kill me? She did not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang would dare to do that. Chu Yingfei was very indifferent. Limitless Palace always had this rule: private fights were not allowed. If they fought in private, the challenger would be punished. Bailey Hongzhuang was so arrogant, she didn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang would dare to attack her in public. If Bailey Hongzhuang really made a move, then the one who would be punished would definitely be Bailey Hongzhuang. She was also willing to use this method to dampen Bailey Hongzhuang's arrogance. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang was the weakest among them. She did not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang could defeat her. After Chu Yingfei understood all these problems, she only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's threat was not threatening at all. When everyone saw that the conflict between Chu Yingfei and Bailey Hongzhuang was constantly sharpening, and they were afraid that it would not end well, their feelings were very complicated. However, now that it had reached this point, no matter how they tried to stop it, it would be useless. However, there were still many cultivators who wanted to know the result of this confrontation, and who would have the upper hand in the end. Bailey Hongzhuang, your strength is the weakest among us. You want to deal with me with just you? You're dreaming. Chu Yingfei was completely frightened by Bailey Hongzhuang's aura, so she was afraid of Bailey Hongzhuang's threat. Chapter 1872. What's wrong with Chu Yingfei today? Why does she have to go against the new female disciple? We've known Chu Yingfei for so long. Don't we know what kind of person she is? She's just jealous of the new female disciple's appearance and background. That's why she's trying to make Bailey Hongzhuang unhappy. However, I didn't expect the new female disciple to be so stubborn. Her words were watertight, and Chu Yingfei was so angry that she almost died. However, what Chu Yingfei said is right. The new female disciple's strength is probably at level 2 of the Green Realm. Chu Yingfei is already at level 5 of the Green Realm. She's no match for her at all. If they really fight, I'm afraid the new female disciple will be the one at a disadvantage. Although that's true, this female disciple's identity is definitely not ordinary. If Chu Yingfei really offends her, I'm afraid the consequences will not be good. The surrounding cultivators had their own opinions and were discussing animatedly. They were quite curious about the outcome of this battle. Pei Yifan saw that this matter was getting more and more out of hand, and his brows were tightly knitted together. He originally wanted to warn Chu Yingfei a few words, and then this matter would be over. He didn't expect that because of his words, this matter would continue to escalate. Pei Yifan had a very good impression of the new female disciple. At the very least, this woman had stood up because of him. He couldn't let Bailey Hongzhuang suffer a loss like this. How should I address you? Pei Yifan asked. I'm Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang replied. Bailey Hongzhuang had a very good impression of Pei Yifan. At least, at that time, Pei Yifan was willing to stand up for her, which already proved that he was a very upright person. After knowing Bailey Hongzhuang's name, Pei Yifan frowned slightly. He only felt that this name was slightly familiar, but he couldn't figure out where he had heard it. After the surrounding cultivators heard this name, a touch of doubt appeared on their faces. This name sounds familiar to me. Where have I heard it before? Yeah, I also feel that it's very familiar, but I can't remember when I've heard it. That's right. Isn't the first place of this assessment called Bailey Hongzhuang? As soon as one of the cultivators said that, all the cultivators present were stunned for a moment before they came to their senses. That's right, the first place of the assessment is called Bailey Hongzhuang. But, she's a disciple of Tiangang's sect. Why did she come to Wuji Palace? Everyone was for a while. At Wuji, Chu Yi's Bailey Hongzhuang the first place of the assessment. Chu Wuji with the first place of the assessment is with Bailey Hongzhuang to Tiangang. Tiangang to Hongzhuang to Yi to the Tiangang to the wrong. The reason why the Palace Master and Madam Palace Master brought Bailey Hongzhuang here personally was to give some face to Tiangang's sect. It wasn't because of Bailey Hongzhuang's identity at all. So you're just a new disciple of Tiangang's sect. How dare you be so arrogant in our Wuji Palace? I think you're quite brave. Chu Yingfei mocked. At this moment, she was unscrupulous in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Faced with Chu Yingfei's ridicule, Bailey Hongzhuang acted as if she didn't hear it. Chapter 1873. It seems like the assessment competition's influence is not small. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed inwardly. Junior sister Bailey, Limitless Palace has always prohibited private fights. If you fight in private, you will definitely be punished. Pei Yifan kindly reminded Bailey Hongzhuang. He felt very guilty that things had turned out this way. Hearing Pei Yifan's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with understanding. Bailey Hongzhuang was not surprised by Limitless Palace's rule. In fact, many sects had such rules, including Tiangang sect. However, she had never thought of fighting Chu Yingfei head-on. If she wanted to teach Chu Yingfei a lesson, she had many ways to do so. There was no need for her to violate the sect's rules. When Chu Yingfei saw Pei Yifan's reminder to Bailey Hongzhuang, her gaze towards Pei Yifan was filled with dissatisfaction. However, she did not care. In this way, Bailey Hongzhuang would not dare to attack her. Then, the person who had the upper hand would still be her. Thinking of this, Chu Yingfei's face was filled with pride. At this moment, she wanted to see how Bailey Hongzhuang was going to fight with her. Bailey Hongzhuang looked indifferently at Chu Yingfei. Her voice was still cold and indifferent. Chu Yingfei, have you made your choice? When Bailey Hongzhuang said this, all the cultivators present looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment. They did not expect that after things had developed to this extent, Bailey Hongzhuang still insisted on what she had said earlier. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was not worried about Limitless Palace's punishment? As a disciple of Tiangang sect, if she caused trouble in Limitless Palace, the impact would be even greater. Chu Yingfei could not help but sneer. She did not understand how Bailey Hongzhuang could continue to persist. I won't apologize. What can you do about it? Chu Yingfei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with ridicule and disdain. She felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's arrogance was all an act. She was just putting on a strong front. Pei Yifan looked at Bailey Hongzhuang worriedly. The situation was already one-sided. After Bailey Hongzhuang's true identity was revealed, Chu Yingfei would definitely be more unscrupulous. If this continued, Bailey Hongzhuang would be the one at a disadvantage. Thinking of this, Pei Yifan could not help but regret. If he hadn't asked for Bailey Hongzhuang's name, then no one would have known about it, and Chu Yingfei wouldn't have been so arrogant. However, since things had already developed to this point, the best way to give up. He did not understand why Bailey Hongzhuang was so stubbornly. If she insisted, the unlucky one in the end would only be Bailey Hongzhuang. Doesn't Bailey Hongzhuang know that if this continues, she will be the one at a disadvantage? There is no benefit for her at all. Now that things have developed to this point, if Bailey Hongzhuang gives up like this, I'm afraid that Chu Yingfei will target her everywhere in the future. Speaking of which, this matter was caused by Chu Yingfei from the beginning to the end. For Bailey Hongzhuang, it is really an unexpected disaster. There is no other way. Chu Yingfei has always been like this. We just have to watch the show. As the matter became more and more intense, many disciples who were cultivating retreated from Wind Canyon after seeing this scene. Chapter 1874. However, after understanding the situation, everyone only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was really unlucky. However, Chu Yingfei's personality was like this. To them, there was no need to offend Chu Yingfei for a new Bailey Hongzhuang who was not even a disciple of Limitless Palace. Therefore, everyone only cared about watching the show from the sidelines. They wanted to see how this farce would end. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't force yourself. When you can't pretend anymore, it will be even more embarrassing. Chu Yingfei was proud. Now that the worry in her heart had dissipated, she only felt an indescribable joy. At this moment, the person who was looking down on her was her. I'm really curious. With your personality, how can other people tolerate it? Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. Usually, this kind of person would not be popular. This was because this kind of personality was really annoying. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the surrounding cultivators' eyes suddenly fell on Chu Yingfei. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang said, Chu Yingfei's popularity among them was really not good. They did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang could analyze so many characteristics of Chu Yingfei after just meeting her for the first time. Even they could not help but feel a burst of surprise in their hearts. After all, just this judgment alone was not something an ordinary cultivator could have. Chu Yingfei frowned. She did not understand why Bailey Hongzhuang could poke her sore spot every time she spoke. And it was precisely because of Bailey Hongzhuang that she hated Bailey Hongzhuang even more. Chu Yingfei secretly swore in her heart. If she did not teach Bailey Hongzhuang a lesson today, she would definitely not let it go easily. Don't talk nonsense, Yi Zichen said coldly. Chu Yingfei said angrily, now that I've given you the answer, you won't just say it and not do it, right? Chu Yingfei smiled and paced back and forth. She looked up and down at Bailey Hongzhuang. I already knew that you were a paper tiger. Now, I'll give you two choices. Either you kowtow to me now and admit your mistake. Otherwise, get out of Limitless Palace. As soon as Chu Yingfei said this, Bailey Hongzhuang narrowed her eyes, but she was thinking about how to punish Chu Yingfei. Chu Yingfei. Don't go overboard. Pei Yifan said angrily. He never thought that Chu Yingfei would actually push him so hard, and the words she said were also extremely excessive. Pei Yifan, what does me dealing with Bailey Hongzhuang have to do with you? Don't tell me you really like her. Chu Yingfei looked at Pei Yifan mockingly. She hated Pei Yifan's messianic look. It was ridiculous. Chu Yingfei, you are simply unreasonable. Pei Yifan frowned. In the past, he did not have a good impression of Chu Yingfei. She was arrogant and jealous. Whenever others behaved well, she would say something bad about them. It was as if this was the only way to balance her heart. Because of this, he rarely paid attention to Chu Yingfei. If he got involved with a woman like Chu Yingfei, he was afraid that there would be endless trouble. And now, the situation in front of him was undoubtedly the best proof of this point. Kowtow and admit your mistake. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a mocking smile. It seemed that Chu Yingfei would not shed tears until she saw the coffin. Chapter 1875. Chu Yingfei's smile was ferocious and proud. She wanted to take advantage of today's good opportunity to establish her prestige. Do you think you're worthy? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. Her beautiful face was filled with provocation. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's provocative words, Chu Yingfei also frowned. She gritted her teeth and said, Bailey Hongzhuang. Since you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, then I'll let you have a taste of the consequences. As soon as her voice fell, under everyone's surprised gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang's figure quickly disappeared on the spot. When everyone saw clearly, Bailey Hongzhuang had already appeared in front of Chu Yingfei. One hand was already strangling Chu Yingfei's neck. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was so close to her, Chu Yingfei was also dumbfounded. Her strength was much stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang. However, in that instant, she didn't see how Bailey Hongzhuang appeared in front of her. At this moment, seeing Bailey Hongzhuang in front of her, she only felt a lingering fear in her heart. If Bailey Hongzhuang didn't strangle her neck with her hand, but directly used a dagger, then she would have been a corpse by now. Chu Yingfei's pitch-black eyes were filled with shock and fear. She never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's speed would be so fast. It was completely beyond her expectations. She simply couldn't imagine how a person with the strength of Green Realm Level 2 could reach such a level of speed. The cultivators present were also dumbfounded at this moment. Their gazes all gathered on Bailey Hongzhuang. Although they had a certain understanding of Bailey Hongzhuang's strength before, and thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was already a genius with such strength at her age. However, at least now, Bailey Hongzhuang's strength was still not enough to compete with them. However, after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's situation, they understood that Bailey Hongzhuang's combat strength was not weak at all. If it was a sneak attack, they would not be able to guard against it. Oh my God, Bailey Hongzhuang's speed is so fast. This is too shocking. I heard that the first place of this assessment competition is very powerful. Now that I've seen Bailey Hongzhuang, I understand that it's all true. Now the cultivators in the assessment competition are getting stronger year by year. I heard that Chu Yingfei was also a cultivator who passed the assessment competition, but her strength is not on the same level as Bailey Hongzhuang's. The crowd of core disciples lowered their voices as they slowly discussed. Bailey Hongzhuang's move really made them feel a burst of amazement. Pei Yifan also stared at Bailey Hongzhuang. He couldn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang's speed was so fast. As everyone knew, it was never easy to increase one's speed. It was even more complicated than increasing one's cultivation. He had to admit that Bailey Hongzhuang's current speed was definitely the fastest among all the cultivators he knew. "You, what are you going to do?" Chu Yingfei slowly said, her voice was filled with fear and worry. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang was strangling her neck. If she moved slightly, she might not be able to keep her life. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. Her mocking and cold gaze focused on Chu Yingfei. "What do you think I'm going to do?" Chapter 1876. Let me tell you, Limitless Palace doesn't allow private fights. If you dare to attack me, then be prepared to receive the punishment. Chu Yingfei's voice was trembling, but she still looked at Bailey Hongzhuang fiercely. She couldn't weaken her momentum now, otherwise, Bailey Hongzhuang would be even more unscrupulous. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't put Chu Yingfei's threat in her eyes at all. "After killing you, what kind of punishment I will receive is my business. You don't need to worry about it. But now, you should worry about yourself." Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was indifferent and cold, without the slightest bit of warmth. It was as cold as a glacier in the extreme north, incomparably cold. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Chu Yingfei's face became extremely ugly. She never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's personality would be so stubborn, completely different from her appearance. Even though she had already mentioned the sex rules, Bailey Hongzhuang was still unmoved. At this moment, she really didn't know what to do. The surrounding disciples looked at this dramatic scene, and their expressions were full of surprise and lamentation. Previously, they only thought that Chu Yingfei was not Bailey Hongzhuang's opponent at all. After knowing Bailey Hongzhuang's identity, they only thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was not Chu Yingfei's opponent. However, they never thought that in just a short period of time, the situation would change again. The person who now had the upper hand was still Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, Pei Yifan was standing at the side, his mood was very complicated. Although today was the first time he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, everything that Bailey Hongzhuang showed gave people a different feeling. Clearly, Bailey Hongzhuang was the one who was at a disadvantage, but Bailey Hongzhuang never showed the slightest bit of worry. On the contrary, he only felt that from beginning to end, all the changes were under Bailey Hongzhuang's control. "You. What do you want?" After knowing Bailey Hongzhuang's tough attitude, Chu Yingfei knew that no matter how she threatened Bailey Hongzhuang at this moment, it would only have the opposite effect. Therefore, at this moment of life and death, she could only temporarily put down her dignity and listen to Bailey Hongzhuang's orders. "What I want to do, I've already said it very clearly before. However, I think that my previous actions were too lenient. Bailey Hongzhuang spoke slowly, a cold smile on her lips. If you kowtow and admit your mistake, I'll let you go. Pay her back in her own coin you. When Bailey Hongzhuang say this, Bailey Hongzhuang, and Bailey Hongzhuang, Zhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang's, Chu everything. Was to say, Hongzhuang. To Bailey Hongzhuang not, you Hongst, Hongzhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang. Thinking of this, everyone felt that it was a little funny. Things in the world really could not be predicted in advance. Chu Yingfei's face turned red. She knew that Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to use this method to humiliate her. However, it was useless to know. Her life was now in Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. She could only listen to Bailey Hongzhuang. She had no other choice. I don't have much patience. I'll give you 3 seconds. If you don't make a choice, then I'll have to make the decision for you. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was cold. She looked at Chu Yingfei with eyes full of cruelty and murderous intent, without any warmth. Chapter 1877. Bailey Hongzhuang's words were like a warning bell that rang in Chu Yingfei's ears. Her emotions were complicated to the extreme. Her mind was constantly calculating how to escape from Bailey Hongzhuang's claws. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's right hand was now tightly clasped around her neck. She could feel that as long as she moved slightly, Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely not hold back. 2. Bailey Hongzhuang continued to count. Everyone's eyes fell on Chu Yingfei. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's calm and composed appearance, it was obvious that everything she said was true. If Chu Yingfei didn't kowtow and admit her mistake now, Bailey Hongzhuang would really take her life. 1. The moment Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, her hand that was holding Chu Yingfei's neck tightened quietly. After Chu Yingfei felt Bailey Hongzhuang's change, she completely panicked and immediately said, "Wait. I apologize. I'll apologize now." As soon as she said this, everyone's expression changed. It seemed that their prediction was not wrong. The person who was at a disadvantage in the end was still Chu Yingfei. Bailey Hongzhuang looked indifferently at Chu Yingfei. "Since you've already made your decision, then kowtow and admit your mistake now." Bailey Hongzhuang's posture was arrogant. Her pitch-black phoenix eyes rippled with a cold light. Towards a person like Chu Yingfei, she would not give her any face at all. Only through this method would Chu Yingfei know the price of offending her. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Chu Yingfei nodded repeatedly. She did not dare to delay any longer. In the next moment, under everyone's shocked gazes, Chu Yingfei directly knelt in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. "It was all my fault before. I won't dare to do it again." Chu Yingfei lowered her head. Fragments of sunlight shone on her body. Her eyelids drooped slightly, leaving a shadow on her face. No one could see the look in her eyes, and no one could tell what she was thinking in her heart. Seeing that Chu Yingfei had already apologized, Bailey Hongzhuang withdrew her hand. Since Chu Yingfei had already learned her lesson, she was not prepared to continue pursuing the matter. In fact, she was not in the mood to deal with such trouble. If Chu Yingfei had not taken the initiative to provoke her again and again, she would not have cared at all. I didn't expect that in the end, it was Chu Yingfei who apologized. Bailey Hongzhuang is really amazing. Chu Yingfei actually kowtowed to apologize in front of everyone. In the future, she won't be able to raise her head in front of Bailey. She's probably won't be able to raise her head in front of Bailey Hongzhuang in the future. Who told Chu Yingfei to reap what she sowed? If she didn't take the initiative to provoke Bailey Hongzhuang, how could there be such trouble now? Chu Yingfei has always bullied the weak and feared the strong. If Bailey Hongzhuang was not strong enough, I think the one being bullied now would be Bailey Hongzhuang. After Chewing Fei kowtowed and apologized, she was ready to stand up. But at the moment Chewing Fei was about to stand up, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice sounded again. "You haven't apologized to Pei Yifan yet," Bailey Hongzhuang said coldly. Hearing this, Chewing Fei was stunned for a moment. Her gaze fell on Pei Yifan. Feeling Chewing Fei's gaze, Pei Yifan was slightly taken aback. He frowned and said, "Forget it." He never had any good impression of Chewing Fei. Similarly, he would not care too much. The reason why he stood up before was that he felt that Chewing Fei's words were too much. Chapter 1878. Hearing Pei Yifan's words, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Pei Yifan. Looking at Pei Yifan's righteous and indifferent expression, Bailey Hongzhuang understood that Pei Yifan probably didn't care about these things at all. However, Pei Yifan's disdain was Pei Yifan's business, but Chewing Fei had insulted Pei Yifan because of her. Therefore, she couldn't let this matter end just like that. "Hurry up and apologize." Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was cold as she urged Chewing Fei. Chewing Fei glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang and could only unwillingly apologize to Pei Yifan, "I'm sorry." Pei Yifan nodded slightly and said, "Let's leave it at that." He knew very well that if Chewing Fei wasn't forced to apologize, she wouldn't have done this at all. Therefore, he didn't care too much about it. However, he felt a little different about Bailey Hongzhuang's insistence. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang only stood out to deal with Chewing Fei because he was slandered by Chewing Fei. Bailey Hongzhuang also stood out to make Chewing Fei apologize to him. All of this showed that Bailey Hongzhuang was a person who knew how to repay kindness. Anyone like this wouldn't be bad. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also nodded. Since Pei Yifan didn't care about it, she didn't need to care about anything else. To her, the most important thing now was to pass the Wind Canyon's test. Since that's the case, let's end this matter like this, Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said. The surrounding core disciples' expressions changed when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang like this. Although Bailey Hongzhuang taught Chewing Fei a lesson today, most of the cultivators had a scale in their hearts and could see this matter clearly. From the beginning to the end, Chewing Fei was the one who went to find trouble with Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, when Chewing Fei was taught a lesson, they didn't think there was anything wrong with it. On the contrary, the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly flared up was because of Pei Yifan. This was the reason why they sighed. I feel that Bailey Hongzhuang's character is quite good. Pei Yifan stood up for her. She didn't pretend to be weak, nor did she pretend to ignore him. Instead, she asked Chewing Fei to apologize to Pei Yifan. Just this point alone can tell that Bailey Hongzhuang is a good person. That's right, I feel. I can't just ignore Chewing Fei's s, she's can't be ignored. This isn't something an ordinary person can do. Yi's is. Hongzhuang, t-s, st at the zhuang. From this alone, they could anti-teat. Tst. Bailey Hongzhuang walked towards the Wind Canyon after settling this matter. She had already figured out how to improve the situation. Now, she needed to keep trying to find a way. In fact, she didn't know any other disciples apart from Pei Yifan. Therefore, there was no use for her to stay here. Chewing Fei's expression became even uglier when she heard that everyone was siding with Bailey Hongzhuang. She never thought that after she was humiliated like this, everyone would still side with Bailey Hongzhuang. This was something she couldn't accept. Chapter 1879. Previously, Pei Yifan inexplicably spoke up for Bailey Hongzhuang. She had never liked Pei Yifan's behavior anyway, so it was not a big deal to have a conflict with him. However, many cultivators stood on her side and mocked Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, the situation had changed. Everyone stood on Bailey Hongzhuang's side. She felt as if she deserved to be in such a situation. Thinking of this, Chu Yingfei felt that she could not tolerate it at all. She was just a newcomer to Bailey Hongzhuang, and she was not even a cultivator of Limitless Palace. Now, she was using her as a stepping stone to win people's hearts. How could this be? Chu Yingfei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with eyes full of hatred. She had been in Limitless Palace for so long, and no one had ever dared to treat her like this. No. This was absolutely not allowed. In the next moment, under everyone's astonished gaze, Chu Yingfei directly took out a dagger and rushed towards Bailey Hongzhuang without hesitation. Bailey Hongzhuang, I'm going to kill you. The origin energy in Chu Yingfei's body exploded in an instant. She pushed her speed to the limit, and an image kept appearing in her mind. She wanted to ruthlessly stab her dagger into Bailey Hongzhuang's body. She wanted to use Bailey Hongzhuang's blood to wash away all the humiliation from before. Only then could she raise her head and face everyone again. This sudden scene exceeded all the cultivators' expectations. They never thought that after the previous incident, Chu Yingfei would suddenly lose control. They could clearly feel the murderous aura that erupted from Chu Yingfei's body. Obviously, Chu Yingfei hated Bailey Hongzhuang to the core and wanted to take Bailey Hongzhuang's life. Pei Yifan also did not expect Chu Yingfei to suddenly do this. He was stunned for a moment. The moment he reacted, he wanted to warn Bailey Hongzhuang. However, it was too late to say anything. Just as he was about to warn her, Chu Yingfei had already rushed behind Bailey Hongzhuang. Junior sister Bailey, be careful. Pei Yifan shouted. When he said this, Pei Yifan's eyes were filled with deep helplessness and sadness. Chu Yingfei's dagger was just inches away. It would be useless for him to warn her now. Bailey Hongzhuang also felt Chu Yingfei quickly approaching from behind, and her dark eyes were filled with a cold light. It seemed that her judgment was right. Chu Yingfei was not someone who would give up. When she was teaching Chu Yingfei a lesson, she knew that Chu Yingfei was not someone who would give up so easily. However, after seeing Chu Yingfei, Bailey Hongzhuang's, Bailey Hongzhuang Huang's, sheet S's, was. So, Bailey Hongzhuang's, when she was, Bailey Hongzhuang's, Bailey was Yai Yingfei. If Chu Yingfei did not continue to pester her, then the medicine would not have any effect on Chu Yingfei. However, Chu Yingfei insisted on forcing her, so she could only let Chu Yingfei experience the consequences. After all, cultivators who seek their own deaths deserved it. Chu Yingfei's dagger ruthlessly stabbed down. When she saw the dagger getting closer and closer to Bailey Hongzhuang, the smile on her face became even more sinister and happy. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang was going to die in her hands. Chapter 1880. Everyone's pupils instantly dilated. None of them would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would actually lose her life in such a situation. Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang still had a complete victory. Who would have thought that Chu Yingfei would actually choose to launch a sneak attack? This was truly impossible to guard against. Bailey Hongzhuang is really finished now. She's too unlucky. Chu Yingfei is really despicable. She actually chose to launch a sneak attack. This kind of method is simply not presentable. I'm afraid that Chu Yingfei is so angry that she would do such an irrational thing. If Elder Su finds out about this later, Chu Yingfei will definitely not be able to escape unscathed. Everyone shook their heads. This kind of Chu Yingfei was like a mad dog. Once she entangled someone, she would not let go at all. It really made people feel helpless. Compared to everyone's helplessness and disdain, Chu Yingfei's eyes were filled with excitement. To the current her, nothing else was important. At this moment, she only wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang. Otherwise, she would definitely not be able to take this lying down. Just when everyone thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely going to die, the next scene shocked everyone. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly used the shadow shifting technique. Her figure flashed, and she appeared 5 meters away from her original position. Chu Yingfei's dagger fiercely stabbed down. However, she did not feel the slightest bit of resistance. It was as if she pounced on empty air. Seeing this, Chu Yingfei could not help but frown. She did not understand what was going on. Immediately after, Chu Yingfei and the group of cultivators saw Bailey Hongzhuang's figure appear 5 meters away. Immediately, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. Their faces were filled with shock. Heavens, in that situation just now, Bailey Hongzhuang was actually able to dodge. This is too shocking. Just how terrifying is Bailey Hongzhuang's speed? I didn't see the previous scene, and I still haven't seen how Bailey Hongzhuang disappeared. It's too scary. Almost all the cultivators were amazed by Bailey Hongzhuang's speed. Such speed was really unexpected. Pei Yifan breathed a sigh of relief after seeing this scene. Fortunately, Bailey Hongzhuang's reaction was fast enough, otherwise, she would have become a corpse by now. I'm afraid Chu Yingfei is going to be in trouble now. It was unknown which cultivator sighed, but everyone's gaze was focused on Chu Yingfei. Chu Yingfei didn't even succeed in killing Bailey Hongzhuang with that perfect opportunity just now. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang was on guard, Chu Yingfei had even less hope. He was afraid that the consequences that Chu Yingfei would have to bear now would be much worse than before. Chu Yingfei was also dumbfounded at this moment. She stared blankly at the dagger in her hand and Bailey Hongzhuang who was standing in front of her. She could not understand. Her speed was clearly very fast just now. Why was Bailey Hongzhuang still able to dodge the attack? Facing the situation in front of her, she only felt that her mind was blank. Succeed or die trying. This sentence was undoubtedly the portrayal of the situation in front of her. Facing Bailey Hongzhuang's astonishing speed, she could not help but feel an indescribable fear in her heart. It was as if she was not Bailey Hongzhuang's opponent at all. Chapter 1881. Bailey Hongzhuang looked coldly at Chu Yingfei and said slowly, "I wanted to let you go, but it seems that you don't appreciate it." As soon as these words came out, Chu Yingfei's heart skipped a beat. An ominous premonition spread in her heart. Although Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was very calm, as if she was only talking about the weather today, she could still feel Bailey Hongzhuang's faint murderous aura and threat. However, she couldn't say anything right now. Beg for mercy. If she really did that, she wouldn't have the face to see anyone in the future. Fight head on. She didn't want to die like this. When Bailey Hongzhuang dealt with her earlier, she had already seen Bailey Hongzhuang's methods. However, Bailey Hongzhuang only used her hand previously. If she changed to a dagger now, it would be difficult for her to escape death. Thinking of this, Chu Yingfei couldn't help but feel regret. If she knew this would happen, she wouldn't have done these things impulsively. However, no matter how much Chu Yingfei regretted it now, it was all useless. Now, all the decisions were in Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. She didn't have any room to maneuver. At this moment, Chu Yingfei only wanted to escape quickly. Only by escaping now could she have a chance to live. Otherwise, with Bailey Hongzhuang's current appearance, she was afraid that she would really lose her life here. However, when she thought of escaping, Chu Yingfei couldn't help but think of Bailey Hongzhuang's terrifying speed. She was afraid that before she could escape, Bailey Hongzhuang would have already caught her. At this moment, Chu Yingfei suddenly remembered that Elder Su was around this wind canyon. As long as she shouted and attracted Elder Su, she didn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang could kill her in front of Elder Su. Bailey Hongzhuang wouldn't have such courage unless she no longer wanted to stay in Limitless Palace. Chu Yingfei's originally gloomy eyes suddenly lit up after she understood this point. In the next moment, under everyone's astonished gazes, Chu Yingfei loudly shouted. "Elder Su, save me!" This sudden change was beyond everyone's expectations. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. None of them would have thought that Chu Yingfei would suddenly call out to Elder Su at this time. I find that this Chu Yingfei is becoming more and more shameless. She was the one who started this. I didn't expect her to have the face to ask Elder Su for help. That's true. Bailey Hongzhuang is a disciple of the Tiangang sect who came to cultivate the limitless method. Now that Chu Yingfei has shown such a side, it has really caused all of us to lose face. It was unknown which cultivator said this, but the faces of all the disciples present became ugly. There had always been a certain amount of competition between the major sections. Although the limitless method and the Tiangang sect didn't have much contact, they still had the opportunity to meet occasionally. In their opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang, as a disciple of the Tiangang sect, must have come to Limitless Palace to cultivate this time to learn. After Bailey Hongzhuang returned to the Tiangang sect, he would definitely tell the cultivators of the Tiangang sect what he saw in Limitless Palace. Chapter 1882. Chu Yingfei naturally knew what the other core disciples were thinking, but for her now, the most important thing was to protect her own life. As for whether she would lose face or not, that was something to think about later. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Chu Yingfei in front of her, and the ridicule in her eyes became deeper and deeper. In her opinion, this Chu Yingfei was really a piece of rat shit that ruined a pot of porridge. There was actually such a shameless cultivator among the core disciples of Limitless Palace. If Chu Yingfei represented Limitless Palace in the future, she would probably completely lose face for Limitless Palace. However, even though she had already lost face, Chu Yingfei still had a self-satisfied look on her face, as if she had thought of a clever idea. It was really too laughable. Su Hechuan was originally cultivating not far from Wind Canyon. If there was nothing to do on a normal day, the core disciples could just cultivate by themselves. The other disciples would only look for him if there was something more important. When Su Hechuan heard someone asking for help, he couldn't help but frown. Limitless Palace had always prohibited cultivators from fighting in private. For such a long time, such a thing had never happened. How could someone suddenly ask for help? Chapter 1883. Su Hechuan's voice was cold and full of majesty. His wise and sharp gaze swept across all the cultivators present. Everyone felt Su Hechuan's gaze and withdrew their gazes and lowered their heads. Elder Su still had absolute prestige among them. Usually, Elder Su's words carried enormous weight. They would not offend Elder Su at all. After Su Hechuan noticed everyone's expression, his gaze finally stopped on Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Yingfei. Previously, he and Bailey Hongzhuang only had a short exchange. However, judging from Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude, he still had a good impression of Bailey Hongzhuang. He did not expect that trouble would arise in such a short time. However, he also had a certain understanding of Chu Yingfei. Usually, there were many cultivators who had conflicts with Chu Yingfei. Now that there was a conflict, he had to understand the real situation before making a decision. You said that Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to kill you. Su Hechuan looked at Chu Yingfei. His majestic face was filled with doubt and surprise. Chu Yingfei nodded repeatedly. Her eyes were filled with resentment as she looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. The original nervousness in her eyes had turned into pride and unbridled arrogance. However, when she turned her head to look at Su Hechuan, her face became delicate and pitiful again. She was flustered everywhere. Yes, Elder Su. This Bailey Hongzhuang is too arrogant. She is clearly not a disciple of Limitless Palace, but her words and actions are very domineering. She actually wanted to kill me in Limitless Palace. This is too much. Hearing Chu Yingfei's words, Su Heshuan frowned even more. I'm asking you what happened. If nothing happened, why would Bailey Hongzhuang want to kill you? Elder Su said. As soon as these words came out, Chu Yingfei's face turned ugly. According to Chu Yingfei's thoughts, Su Heshuan was an elder of Limitless Palace, so he would definitely choose to stand on her side when facing this matter. However, now that Su Heshuan asked about the whole process of the matter, she did not know how to answer. There were so many cultivators present. She did not know whether these people would stand on her side or on Bailey Hongzhuang's side. If the situation she said was completely different from what the other cultivators said, then she was afraid that Elder Su's impression of her would be greatly reduced. Looking at Chu Yingfei's vague appearance, Su Heshuan's eyes gradually flashed with a hint of understanding. It seemed that this matter was not that simple. After encountering such a situation, the surrounding disciples fell into silence one after another. However, no one chose to leave because they wanted to know how Elder Su would deal with this matter. Seeing that Chu Yingfei didn't speak for a long time, Su Heshuan's eyes turned to Bailey Hongzhuang and said, "Tell me, what happened?" Listening to Su Heshuan's question, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and decided to tell Su Heshuan everything that had happened before. Master didn't tell Elder Su about her identity. Presumably, Elder Su's thoughts were the same as the other core disciples. In their eyes, she was just a disciple of Tiangang sect. Although they did not know the reason for coming to Limitless Palace to cultivate, everyone could guess that it was for the exchange. Chapter 1884. Chu Yingfei first provoked me verbally, and then she was forced to apologize to me. Just as I was about to go to the Wind Canyon to cultivate, Chu Yingfei suddenly launched a sneak attack on me, and I dodged it. Now that Chu Yingfei was caught by me, she shouted that I wanted to kill her, and she called Elder Su over. Bailey Hongzhuang said these words calmly and smoothly. Her exquisite and outstanding face was filled with righteousness, and her pitch-black phoenix eyes were bright without the slightest bit of evasion. This matter, from the beginning to the end, was not started by her. Since Chu Yingfei was now the villain who complained first, she naturally had to tell the truth and not let Chu Yingfei frame her like this. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Su Heshuan's expression changed a bit, and he looked at Chu Yingfei with a bit of anger. Chu Yingfei was his disciple, and he naturally had a certain understanding of Chu Yingfei. The situation that Bailey Hongzhuang said was very similar to Chu Yingfei's usual personality. If this matter was really like this, then he would not be surprised at all. Although it was only Bailey Hongzhuang who said this, in Su Heshuan's heart, he felt that this was very likely. Chu Yingfei, is this really the case? Su Heshuan's gaze fell on Chu Yingfei, and even his dignified voice became a bit colder. If this matter was true, then Chu Yingfei had always been looking for trouble, and now she came to him for help, then this Chu Yingfei really had no backbone at all. He had always thought that it was very normal for there to be conflicts between cultivators. However, since she was a core disciple of Limitless Palace, then she had to bear the consequences of her own actions. She absolutely could not be a cowardly rat. Chu Yingfei's expression was very complicated, and her mind was constantly thinking about how to answer Elder Su's question at this moment. From Elder Su's attitude, she could tell that if she admitted this matter, Elder Su's attitude towards her would definitely not be good. Who knows, she might even be punished in the end. Elder Su, Bailey Hongzhuang is framing me. Chu Yingfei hurriedly said with a determined expression. Her gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang was filled with anger. I saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was a new disciple, so I wanted to get to know her. I didn't expect that she wouldn't even spare me a glance. After that, the conflict between us grew bigger and bigger, and she actually wanted to kill me. That's why I called out to you, Elder Su. After Chu Yingfei finished speaking, she couldn't help but look at the surrounding core disciples. Right now, she already had no way out. She could only hope that her attitude would be able to let the other core disciples understand her thoughts. As long as these core disciples could stand on her side, then this crisis would be completely resolved. Although the attitude of these core disciples previously seemed as if they were all standing on Bailey Hongzhuang's side, but they were all fence-sitters. As long as she inverted black and white with enough vigor, she believed that the others wouldn't seek trouble for themselves. After all, for many cultivators, it was best to play it safe. Looking at Chu Yingfei's hypocritical and pretentious appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang really felt that it was funny. Chapter 1885. After saying all this, Chu Yingfei quietly turned around and raised her eyebrows at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile. Her expression was full of provocation and smugness. In terms of disguise, she was much better than Bailey Hongzhuang. After hearing Chu Yingfei's and Bailey Hongzhuang's completely different statements, Su Heshuan glanced back and forth between Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Yingfei. Although the two of them had different statements, Su Heshuan already had a certain judgment in his heart. In the next second, Su Heshuan directly looked at the surrounding disciples and said, "Tell me, who is telling the truth?" As soon as Su Heshuan finished speaking, all the cultivators present exchanged glances with each other. At this time, they did not know whether to help Bailey Hongzhuang or Chu Yingfei. In their eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang had done the right thing from the beginning to the end. On the contrary, Chu Yingfei had been causing trouble. However, it wouldn't be long before Bailey Hongzhuang left Limitless Palace and would no longer have the slightest intersection with them. However, Chu Yingfei would always stay here. If they chose to stand on Bailey Hongzhuang's side now, they were afraid that Chu Yingfei would continue to cause trouble for them in the following days. They were not afraid of Chu Yingfei, but they hated this kind of trouble. This point could be seen from Chu Yingfei's unrelenting attitude. They hoped that someone would tell the truth, but they did not want to hear it from their own mouths. After seeing everyone's attitude, Su Heshuan was even more certain in his heart. "Pei Yifan, tell me, who is telling the truth about this matter?" Among all the disciples, Pei Yifan had the most honest personality. As an elder, Su Heshuan had a certain understanding of the disciples' personalities. No matter what the situation was, Pei Yifan would never lie. It was precisely because of this that Su Heshuan thought highly of Pei Yifan. As a cultivator, the most important thing was to put all of their thoughts on cultivation. The honest Pei Yifan was undoubtedly much better than some cultivators who only knew how to use crooked methods. As an elder of Limitless Palace, Su Heshuan had seen countless outstanding disciples over the years. Only cultivators who were straightforward and simple-minded could go far on the path of cultivation. When she heard Su Heshuan ask Pei Yifan about this matter, Chu Yingfei's expression turned ugly. He believed that many cultivators would not speak of this matter, except for Pei Yifan. Pei Yifan had already expressed his attitude long ago. Of course, he was on Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Su Heshuan was almost certain that once Pei Yifan spoke, he would tell the truth. "Elder Su, I saw this matter from the beginning to the end. Bailey Hongzhuang speeds was fast, that Bailey is." Ing. Pei Yifan bowed deeply and said respectfully. As soon as Pei Yifan finished speaking, the expressions on the cultivators' faces changed. Their judgment was right. No matter when, Pei Yifan spoke the truth. After Bailey Hongzhuang saw that Pei Yifan did not hesitate to stand by her side, there was a touch of appreciation in her eyes. Chapter 1886. In Bailey Hongzhuang's opinion, as long as she spread the word about what happened today, it would be a piece of cake to solve this problem. However, since she was already cultivating in Wuxia Palace, she should rely on her own strength to deal with everything. She did not want to trouble others because of this. After all, she came to Wuxia Palace to learn from her master. She needed to prove her strength and ability through this performance. If she wanted to become the successor of Wuxia Palace in the future, not only did she need to be strong enough, but she also needed to be able to handle things well. This was the only way she could shoulder the heavy responsibility. After hearing Pei Yifun's answer, Su Heshuan understood everything. He could not help but look at Chu Yingfei. It seemed like the truth was out. Sensing Su Heshuan's gaze, Chu Yingfei knew that something was wrong. She had been cultivating with Su Heshuan for a long time, so she had a certain understanding of Su Heshuan's character. She noticed that Su Heshuan's gaze was filled with warning and displeasure. Obviously, Su Heshuan believed that Pei Yifun was better than her under such circumstances. Chu Yingfei was displeased when she thought of this. If Pei Yifun did not stand up and ruin her plans, the outcome of this matter would not be certain. If Elder Su really wanted to punish her, she would at least make Pei Yifun suffer. Elder Su, Pei Yifun has his own selfish motives. That's why he said such things. He's completely distorting the truth. Pei Yifun said anxiously. He looked at Su Heshuan agitatedly, and his voice was filled with anger. Without waiting for Su Heshuan to speak, Chu Yingfei continued, Pei Yifun has taken a liking to Bailey Hongzhuang since the beginning, so he's trying his best to speak up for Bailey Hongzhuang. First Elder, you can't just listen to Pei Yifun's side of the story. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Chu Yingfei's hypocritical and pretentious appearance and could not help but shake her head. It was truly shameful to be so shameless. Chu Yingfei, you've been distorting the truth from the beginning to the end. How dare you insult Pei Yifun? You've gone too far. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. For someone like Chu Yingfei, even saying another word would make people feel disgusted. Su Heshuan glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang, then his gaze landed on Chu Yingfei. He said, Chu Yingfei, since things have reached this point, don't quibble anymore. Hearing Su Heshuan's words, Chu Yunfei couldn't help but be startled. He didn't think Elder Su would judge everything like this. I already know what exactly is going on. Don't bully others just because you are a core disciple of Limitless Palace. If this happens again, you will be punished. Su Heshuan's voice was filled with dignity and vigilance, making it impossible for others to have the heart to resist. Chu Yingfei, who originally wanted to say more, fell into silence after hearing Su Heshuan's words. Her expression revealed a bit of awkwardness. Limitless Palace has never allowed disciples to fight in private. If you're really dissatisfied, you can go to the life and death arena to fight to the death. Su Heshuan's last sentence was obviously for Bailey Hongzhuang to hear. Chapter 1887. Moreover, this matter was Chu Yingfei's fault. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't do anything wrong. If there was really a grudge between the two, it wasn't impossible to go to the life and death arena to determine the winner. No matter what, Chu Yingfei's sneak attack on others was really wrong. You are punished with 3 months of cultivation resources. Su Heshuan said slowly. As Su Heshuan's voice fell, Chu Yingfei's face instantly became ugly. She didn't expect that after Elder Su appeared, not only did Bailey Hongzhuang not receive any punishment, but she also lost 3 months of cultivation resources. One had to know that core disciples had a lot of cultivation resources every month. It was extremely important for them. Her strength was not considered a powerful existence among the core disciples. In addition, in these 3 months, she didn't have any cultivation resources, but others did. In this situation, she was afraid that when the time came, she would be too far away to catch up with everyone. This was something she definitely didn't want to see. However, looking at Elder Su's firm attitude, it was obvious that there was no room for negotiation. Chu Yingfei's heart was depressed to the extreme. The gaze she looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with was full of hatred. If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang, how could she have fallen to such a state? For cultivators, the most important thing was to improve their strength. Especially among the core disciples, the competition was particularly fierce. As long as one was slightly slower, it would be difficult to catch up with others. During this period of time, she had been working hard to catch up with others. However, everyone's strength was extremely powerful. Even if she worked hard, it was useless. Now that she lost 3 months of cultivation resources, she was afraid that she would be completely left behind by others. If she was careless, she might even be kicked out of the core disciple list. This was definitely not what she wanted to see. When she successfully became a core disciple, it could be said that she had unlimited glory. In the history of Limitless Palace, there were also some core disciples who were kicked out of the core disciple list because of poor performance. Such people often became the joke of Limitless Palace's disciples. They were even more miserable than cultivators who had never been a core disciple. Su Heshuan glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Yingfei and said, "Do you have any objections?" Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head slightly and bowed respectfully. "I will follow Elder's arrangement." She had no objections to Elder Su's punishment. In fact, many elders would make the same choice when faced with such a situation. When Elder Su spoke earlier, he had already pointed out a clear path for her. If she wanted to take revenge, it was not impossible. As long as she invited Chu Yingfei to the life and death arena, it would be enough. Based on the fact that Elder Su had told her this, she knew that Elder Su treated her well. Otherwise, Elder Su would not have specially reminded her of this. Although Chu Yingfei had a lot of dissatisfaction in her heart, she didn't dare to say anything at this time. She could only nod her head, indicating that she had no objections. Seeing that no one had any objections, Elder Su left. Soon, his figure disappeared from everyone's sight. It was only after Elder Su left that the crowd of cultivators present became less restrained and returned to their previous natural state. Chapter 1888. She brought this upon herself. It's best if she is kicked out of the core disciple list. I think this Chu Yingfei's ability to distort the truth is really amazing. Fortunately, Pei Yifan spoke up for Bailey Hongzhuang this time. Otherwise, Bailey Hongzhuang wouldn't be able to explain herself. Fortunately, Chu Yingfei didn't bother us this time. Otherwise, it would be really bad. The group of cultivators nodded. The last thing they wanted to see was this kind of feeling of being harassed by a scoundrel. Just looking at what Chu Yingfei did before, they felt that this was really a scoundrel's behavior. If it was an ordinary person, it would be impossible for them to confuse right and wrong. Although Chu Yingfei didn't find trouble with them this time, no one knew if this kind of thing would happen to them next time. If this kind of thing happened to them, it would really make them feel an indescribable sense of disgust. Chu Yingfei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Pei Yifan hatefully. Her eyes flashed with resentment and malice. Don't be complacent. We'll see about this matter. There will be plenty of time in the future. I will definitely make you pay the price. Up to you. I'm just afraid that you won't have the chance. Bailey Hongzhuang said coldly and looked at Chu Yingfei with disdain. With Chu Yingfei's despicable means, she didn't care to compare with her. Bailey Hongzhuang's words were very cold, but when it fell into Chu Yingfei's ears, it became arrogance and flaunting. She couldn't help but stare at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang, you don't have anything to be proud of. If you weren't a step faster, you would have already died in my hands. Now, Elder Su is still on my side. He only punished me with 3 months of cultivation resources. Your life is only worth 3 months of my cultivation resources. Chu Yingfei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang proudly. Although she was punished today, from Elder Su's attitude, she could see that Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't a big deal. In the future, she would have plenty of opportunities to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang. There was no need to rush. Bailey Hongzhuang sneered and looked at Chu Yingfei coldly. Didn't anyone tell you not to provoke people you can't afford to provoke? Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a cold smile. She faintly looked at Chu Yingfei, her eyes filled with ridicule and mockery. Originally, I wanted to end this matter after you apologized. However, since you don't know how to appreciate favors, I don't mind letting you experience the taste of pain. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Chu Yingfei couldn't help but frown. She didn't understand what Bailey Hongzhuang meant. However, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's strange expression, she could not help but have an ominous premonition. Bailey Hongzhuang had always been very indifferent. Now that she suddenly said such words, it was really not in line with her style. Chu Yingfei only felt that there must be something fishy about this. Things were definitely not so simple. Everyone's eyes focused on Bailey Hongzhuang. Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang had never shown any abnormalities. Even when Chu Yingfei slandered her, Bailey Hongzhuang still didn't show too much anger or anything else. Chapter 1889. Bailey Hongzhuang, stop putting on an act. Chu Yingfei sneered. Although she faintly felt that something was wrong, she did not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang could do anything. She had already thought about it. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang invited her to the life and death ring, she would ignore it. As long as she ignored it, Bailey Hongzhuang could not do anything. Moreover, Elder Su was not far away. If Bailey Hongzhuang really dared to do something now, Elder Su would definitely appear immediately. In the next moment, under everyone's puzzled gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang directly snapped her fingers. After doing this, Bailey Hongzhuang directly turned and walked towards Wind Canyon. All of this was Chu Yingfei's own fault. Let her have a taste of her own medicine. When everyone saw Bailey Hongzhuang turn and leave just like that, their faces were filled with surprise. They did not understand what Bailey Hongzhuang was doing. Was she just teasing them? Chu Yingfei sneered as she looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's back. She knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was just bluffing. Because of what she said before, Bailey Hongzhuang had no way to refute it at all. Pei Hongzhuang's gaze also fell on Bailey Hongzhuang's back. He still could not understand what Bailey Hongzhuang said at the end. Although today was the first time he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, from all the things that happened before, Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely not a person who spoke arrogant words. Since she said something like that, then there must be something wrong. Otherwise, what was the meaning behind Bailey Hongzhuang's sudden snap? Self-righteous. She's just a foreign cultivator. She really thinks she's someone. Chu Yingfei sneered and immediately prepared to leave Wind Canyon. What had happened before had really made her lose face, and she didn't want to stay here any longer. It would be best if she went back to rest for a few days and then came back. Presumably, everyone would have forgotten about this matter. What did Bailey Hongzhuang mean by what she said before? It's really confusing. According to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, she is someone Chu Yingfei can't afford to offend. However, since she said such words, Chu Yingfei should be punished. However, Bailey Hongzhuang left just like that. Chu Yingfei would not be affected at all. I don't understand. Could it really be as Chu Yingfei said, Bailey Hongzhuang was just bluffing? Everyone was puzzled. Bailey Hongzhuang's current actions really made them unable to make sense of it. However, right at the moment when Chewing Fei was preparing to leave, a scream suddenly sounded from her mouth. Chewing Fei Hongzhuang screamed. Her originally complacent face was instantly filled with paleness and pain. Chewing Fei Hongzhuang felt an indescribable pain coming from her body. It was as if her internal organs were being bitten by tens of thousands of insects. It was unbearably painful. The pain came from all four limbs. It was impossible to get rid of it. She did not even know where the pain came from. No matter if it was her mind or her body, there was an indescribable pain. In a short period of time, Chewing Fei's body was covered in cold sweat. Under the intense pain, she was unable to continue. She fell to the ground and curled into a ball. Chapter 1890. Chewing Fei curled up on the ground. Her clothes were soaked in sweat in a short period of time. She couldn't help but twitch. Her teeth bit her lips tightly. Her hands were clenched into fists. Blue veins protruded. She was obviously in great pain. This kind of intense pain was enough to drive Chewing Fei crazy. She had never felt such great pain before. This kind of pain that came from her limbs and bones made her feel that her entire body was on the verge of collapse. At this moment, Chewing Fei couldn't help but think of Bailey Hongzhuang's actions before. Could it be? The reason why she was in such pain was completely because of Bailey Hongzhuang. When this scene flashed through Chewing Fei's mind, she felt that it must be like this. If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang, how could she become like this for no reason? Bailey Hongzhuang. Chewing Fei gritted her teeth and called out Bailey Hongzhuang's name. However, under the influence of this intense pain, it was very difficult for her to even say a word. After everyone heard Chewing Fei's words, they all reacted. Could it be that this was the punishment that Bailey Hongzhuang said before? However, they had never seen Bailey Hongzhuang use any methods from the beginning to the end. In fact, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't even get close to Chewing Fei. Then why did Chewing Fei become like this now? Not only that, but after Bailey Hongzhuang left, Chewing Fei suddenly fell into such intense pain. What kind of method was this? Although everyone couldn't understand how Bailey Hongzhuang did all this, they were still certain that this matter was definitely related to Bailey Hongzhuang. If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang definitely wouldn't have said such inexplicable words. At this moment, everyone suddenly felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was a cultivator that couldn't be provoked. This was because her methods were truly frightening. Chewing Fei's current situation was not faked. Everyone could imagine what kind of pain it was to be able to make her suffer so much. If such a thing happened to them, they probably wouldn't be able to bear it. Oh my God, what did Bailey Hongzhuang do to Chewing Fei? Why did Chewing Fei become like this? It's too shocking. I don't know. I didn't see Bailey Hongzhuang do anything. She only snapped her fingers and Chewing Fei became like this. It's really hard to understand. No wonder Bailey Hongzhuang was so calm when faced with Chewing Fei's mockery. At this moment, everyone understood what was going on. Because they didn't know what method Bailey Hongzhuang had used. Perhaps it was because they didn't understand that they felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's method was even more strange. Bailey Hongzhuang could completely turn them into this state without anyone noticing. Under such pain, Chewing Fei couldn't bear it. After struggling for a moment, she realized that the pain didn't subside at all. Instead, it became more and more intense. She couldn't help but say to everyone, Bailey Hongzhuang, help me find Bailey Hongzhuang. Since this was done by Bailey Hongzhuang, only Bailey Hongzhuang could help her get rid of it. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.